The Q101 Morning Crew.
On Q101.
Brian and Kenzie on Q101. Here we go. I love this show so much, Unsolved Mysteries. And that's a little bit of what we do here with Kenzie's Crimes, but she does have a resolution when we get to the end of it. And you
It's just solved mysteries.
well,
Kenzie's Crimes.
you gave kind of a little bit of mystery. There's always a little bit of mystery when you tease these things, but to the ending of this one.
Yeah, it has kind of a split ending, and one that people disagree on. And even though this happened in the 1960s, the current update just occurred as recent as 2019.
Wow.
So that's kind of how it popped on my radar. I'm really excited about this one. And by the way, we get a lot of crew members who are like, have you done this one yet? Have you heard this one? I love that. I love knowing that at least one person will be interested. If you send in a suggestion, I think that that's a kick forward. So please, if there's one that you want to dive into or one that you love, make sure that you message us at any point on socials or text line. But have you ever heard of the Starved Rock murders?
I have not. Case, have you heard of the Starved Rock murders? Have you ever heard of those?
No, I have not.
Okay, this is good because I like when I don't know anything about it, and I don't know that one.
I know. You must like a lot of your life then, because I feel like you don't know anything about a lot of stuff.
No, I don't. I like learning through Google or Kenzie.
It's all a mystery.
Yep.
Okay, so Starved Rock murders. This happened in March of 1960. Okay.
Okay.
Three middle-aged women who are close friends, were ready and excited about their upcoming trip together. Mildred Lindquist, Lillian Oding, and Frances Murphy. Okay?
Okay.
They had driven from their homes in the Chicago suburbs for a 4-day vacation in Starved Rock Park, which is also based in Illinois.
Right.
They were 3 church friends, and they definitely needed this getaway, especially Lillian, because she had been taking care of her husband for most of the winter at this point and nursing him back from a heart attack. Oof. So it's just one of those, like, let's go to nature, like, getaway experiences. So Frances Murphy parked her gray station wagon at the inn, and they unloaded their luggage and was just getting settled in. They booked 2 rooms at the lodge, and after dropping off their bags, they went to have a little lunch and then went out in the light snow and hit the trails.
Sounds like a beautiful time.
Right? They're excited for Starved Rock Park. This time, March, obviously, in Illinois, it was snowy, light snow, all that action, okay? So they were snapping photos and hiking. And they reached the dead end of St. Louis Canyon. This is probably one of the most popular parts of the park. This is where you can see the frozen waterfall.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of good pictures of that.
Yes, so there's tons of photos of that. If you Google Starved Rock Park, the waterfall is one of the first things that popped up, thawed or not, with frozen or not. So that's kind of where they took their last photos, and it actually would be the last photos that they ever take.
Oh, I just got chills.
Right in front of that waterfall.
Oh, my God. Okay.
So George Oding, Lillian's husband, the one that she had nursed back to health, called the hotel that evening. Because obviously 1960, this isn't cell phone time. This is when you call rooms, right?
Yeah.
He called that evening and was told that the women were unavailable. He called again the next morning, and an employee mistakenly told him that he had seen all 3 women at breakfast. He called again the next morning and demanded employees check on the rooms and check on the women. He's like, I want to talk to my wife. It's been days.
Yeah.
And you're I don't understand where the miscommunication is.
He liked his wife.
Yeah, he did. He enjoyed her. He's like, well, should she not be or something? No, kidding. So he demanded they check the rooms. And when they did so, they realized that all of the women's bags had been untouched. They were just dropped off in the rooms.
Whoa.
And then they went and checked on the car and realized that the car was still there. So the car had remained there, now with snow on top of it. Like snow had gathered on top, so clearly hasn't left.
Yep.
Their bags completely untouched. They haven't been unpacked. They clearly haven't used the beds, any of it, right? And then they get back to her husband and let her know. So George is now realizing that his wife and her friends have been missing for about 40 hours.
Jeez.
Right.
You're supposed to report it, 24 hours you report somebody when they're missing? You have to wait that long?
24 hours, I think, is the rule. I don't know when the rule was back then because these crimes were kind of unheard of back then.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's one of the difficulties that they're going to face. So George immediately called his friend, who is an operating director of Chicago crime commissions, and a search party began, okay? They got together multiple different units for the different surrounding areas because it was a national park and everything. So Bill Donnelly was a local reporter and caught wind that the search was about to kick off, right? The same day that it was happening, and decided to head out to Starved Rock Park to get pictures of it, just to be like, oh, a search is going for these women, right? But when he was approaching one of the park entrances, there is more than one, he saw like a youthful boy kind of running towards a group of his friends and shouting that they had found bodies on the trail.
Oh.
So this reporter, who's just pulling up to take kind of generic pictures, maybe some of the cop cars, things like that, is now realizing that these bodies have been found even prior to police.
Jeez.
So he immediately called the lodge. They reported the police, and the bodies were found right then, like that quickly.
Damn.
They were able to find these bodies. So the three women were found laying side by side. They had been mutilated and covered with snow.
Ugh.
Because they had been sitting there for several days.
Yeah.
They had some of their clothes ripped off. Definitely had been beaten, bruised up a little bit. And two of the three had been tied together. I don't know why you didn't tie all three. I don't really understand that part. But
Well, I mean,
two of them were tied together.
I mean, there's crazy people out there do crazy things.
I know. So, well, obviously. So the two of them were tied together. So the camera that the women had been using on this hike and where they got all the cute pictures, it was found about 10 feet away from their body. The strap was broken. There was blood on the camera. And they also realized, based on the tracks of blood, that clearly the crime had taken place in the forest, and then they were dragged to this little rock overhang as like kind of an attempted hiding place.
Yep.
So they weren't found laying in the middle of the trail. They were found kind of under a rock that stuck out just a little bit. But still not a phenomenal hiding place by any means. It's pretty out in the public. Not long after, they found a frozen tree limb, which was also covered in blood. And they realized that a frozen tree limb is most likely the murder weapon for these three women.
Damn.
Yes. So an autopsy revealed, now autopsies back then don't give us the same amount of information as they do now, but something that it was able to reveal was that they were killed very shortly after lunch. So they had that little lunch and went on their hike, and it was almost like the first thing that happened, which is so sad.
You know how good you feel after like a good lunch and your nature, Starved Rock Park? You know, let's go see everything.
I know.
And that's the end. Ugh, terrible.
That was it. Like, it's such a... It's a bummer for many reasons.
It's a bummer in a lot of ways.
You get 4 minutes into the vacation. It's just like, what the crap? That's just so frustrating.
In case once you eat, you want to just like digest and enjoy.
Oh my God, the post-meal, especially on a vacation, you're in the car cooped up, and then you have a good lunch.
I really felt bad because these women were all so sweet, and they really just deserved this girls' trip. And they get out there, and they can't even be left alone for a couple minutes. Like,
Come on.
So annoying.
Terrible.
Okay, so
Tragic.
It was revealed that obviously that they had passed away not long after their lunch, and they did rule out robbery as a cause since all their valuables had been left in the room.
Yeah.
Right? There was no pocketbooks. There's no fancy jewelry. They were out on a hike. So robbery was almost immediately ruled out. Now, crimes like this weren't very popular back then, obviously, and officers struggled immediately with leads, motives, just a crime of this magnitude. They also found that many of the officers just weren't prepped on how to even do this type of investigation, right? That's, crime has become, unfortunately, just more popular, more vicious, more where people are prepared. And this was like small town energy of like, you got pulled over for speeding. And now officers are dealing with these things. So the area kind of became very frantic, right? Doors locking, bolts and guns were sold out of stores. So like people bought more locks for their doors. They didn't have them on every door. And then guns. So they were actually selling out. And then motorists on motorcycles as well as cars, they were driving, like adding significant mileage to go out of the way. People wouldn't even go by the park entrance.
Wow.
They were so freaked out and nobody knew what was going on. So the state attorney at the time, Harold Warren, he was facing a lot of scrutiny. People were like, you have to solve this. What is going on? Like their minds were exploding, right? And not only was he dealing with a really strict budget because case budgets weren't as large because this kind of stuff didn't happen.
Right.
He was also dealing with tons of like re-election things. And he actually purchased a microscope to examine the only thing the murderer left behind. He purchased it with his own money because the investigation budget wouldn't cover it.
Good guy.
And he decided to start investigating the twine used. It was the only thing left there by the murderer. And I'm going to pause right there.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Now, you did say there's some kind of twist ending here.
There is a very conflicted ending to this one. Very.
Because right now, what you've said and laid out, there's no clue. There's no even possible clue on who did it.
No one, like, these poor people, they had nothing to go off of.
Because some of your stories, you'll have, like, there's kind of a guy here or a girl here or somewhere.
Because these women went out alone.
Yeah.
No one saw anybody.
Yeah.
It was a trail. They can't nail down a motive. No one's rich. No one had stuff on them. It was just...
They had at least one good husband who checked on, too, one of the girls.
They were getting... Yeah, people were checking on that. I mean, it just... It was really tough. So all
baffled.
that was left for them to study, the only thing left behind was the twine used.
Coming up here in just about 6 minutes, you're going to get the conclusion and the answer to who did it in Kenzie's Crimes.
The Q101 Morning Crew.
On Q101.
The Q101 Morning Crew.
On Q101.
All right, it's Kenzie's Crimes, and coming up with the conclusion of a story that you've just laid out that's got me so wild, the Starved Rock murders.
Yes, so Starved Rock murders. Just a quick recap. 3 middle-aged women. They were taking a 4-day trip from the Chicago suburbs all the way out in Starved Rock Park. They were so excited to have this nature experience, and they drove up there. They checked into their rooms, and one of the women's husbands called a couple days in a row.
They care. Husbands care.
Right, was never able to get in contact with her, and finally demanded that employees check, just to find that the rooms had been untouched. The car had never moved. You could tell based off the snowfall, it was covered with snow.
Yup.
And really that same day, called the commissioner. They went out and started searching. Reporters showed up. They found all 3 women's bodies. Ugh. And they did not make it long after their arrival, which was obviously super upset. Now, somebody also texted in because we were asking if you have to wait to report, a 24-hour, wait for missing report. And they said you don't. Which would make sense. You should be able to say something if you think someone's missing earlier. So
I think the rule of that always was, they might have run away, or they just...
maybe that's just a movie thing, because you've been, when they say that on TV shows. But apparently you don't have to wait. That's at least what somebody texted in. So if you think someone's missing...
I want real authority on that from the police or somebody.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't handle missing persons case. I talk about them after they're done. Okay. So... basically, they had no leads because this just seemed like a random act of violence. And, these things were not common back then. So it was just really too much for a lot of the officers. Not all of them, but certainly a lot of them. Correct. So...
it was a small town down there,
that's
too.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
They just weren't. This is 1960s. So the state attorney, Harold Warren, he was really, really having a hard time because there wasn't a huge budget for these cases. And there was also a re-election going on. So there's all this drama on if he should be able to continue everything. So with his own money, he purchased a microscope. Not with the budget for the state, with his own money.
Which is funny, they just didn't have one there either.
Right.
A microscope laying around.
Right. He purchased a microscope because he wanted to examine the one thing that was left behind by the murderer, and that would be the twine that was used to tie 2 of the 3 girls together. So he's examining the twine, and he realized it's a 20-ply cord and a 12-ply cord. And he decided to go right to the lodge where the women were staying and working because people had been out there. And they checked with some of the employees there and realized that they carried the exact same 2 cords to tie food packages up together.
Okay.
And he immediately realized that the killer had worked or had access to the lodge.
Oh.
Because that's where these supplies were clearly from. So back then, they were using polygraph tests on all of the employees. Dozens of them passed like without a problem, to the point where they were even like, are we wasting our time with this? Is it not working? Until Chester Wager walks in. He was a former dishwasher who was interviewed. Okay. Now,
Yep.
Wager's polygraph test was completed, and Warren noticed that the examiner's face had gone white, completely pale. And as soon as this Chester Wager walked out and left the cabin, the technician literally turned to the investigator and said, "That's your man."
Whoa.
Right after months and months and months and all these and the dozens of people they'd interviewed with these polygraph tests. So just as a little background, Chester Wager, who we think is now guilty at this point, he was 21. He was apparently like a little guy. He had a wife, 2 young children, and had worked at that park until that summer. So, and then he resigned to go into business with his dad as a house painter. The man's name, he had come up on an earlier police report, but he was just kind of a simple guy. Like that name did not really stick with them, right? And weirdly enough, Chester was actually super happy to cooperate, which is not what you normally see. Not reading out a lot of his rights or denying people. So he surrendered a piece of his buckskin jacket that he owned.
Of course he had
Because
that.
he had dark skin, like dark, like stained skin on it because of the buckskin stains.
Ugh.
And even though back then you couldn't match blood, they were able to identify it was human blood on the jacket. Okay? But they couldn't match it to the women's because that technology had yet to exist. So then they asked him to do more polygraph tests, and he agreed. He was fine with it. And he was given a huge series of tests, and he failed every single one of them. They were like, he's so compliant, though. So checking into his past, they wanted to see if they could find any similar crimes he could be tethered to, because this is a pretty dramatic one if it's your first crime, right?
Yeah.
So with permission from him, they mixed his mug shots in, okay? They mixed his mugshots in with a girl who had been attacked and robbed in 1959, a year previously. And she went through all the mugshots and was like, no. And when coming across his picture, immediately started bawling and having a panic attack and claiming that it was him.
Oh, no.
Yes. Okay.
Wow.
So, I know.
Sounds like it's wrapped up.
Yes. You would think.
Yeah.
So let me find where I'm at. I'm sorry, it's a lot of information.
That's okay.
Okay. So they retained an arrest warrant for that 1959 case that she just identified him in mugshots, okay? And they were hoping that once they brought him in on that arrest warrant, that he would like kind of cave, realizing all the information, the blood, the twine, this woman identifying him. They hoping that he would start to admit things once you have that much mounted against you.
Yeah.
So after a full night of interrogation, and you know how they get good cop, bad cop you the whole time, right? He asked if he could see his family, and the officers complied. And the parents came in. They gave him a little alone time together. And when the parents left after just a little bit of time, the officer realized he could creep in with kind of like a sweet moment. I think this is good cop, bad cop. And he said he could tell something was wrong. And he goes, Chester, why don't you tell me about it? There are just 2 of us here. Just tell me what's going on in your head.
Man.
And he said, all right, I did it. I got scared. I tried to grab their pocketbook. And they fought it, and I hit them. He had apparently mistaken the camera they were using for a pocketbook. It wasn't. That was what they claimed. Minutes later, the confession was transcribed, typed up. It was signed by Chester. And during the confession, they even asked him, why did you drag the bodies, right? Because they were found in a different spot than clearly things had happened. And he said that he dragged the bodies to that overhang under the rock because he spotted a small airplane flying low and he didn't want anyone to see it.
Weird.
And that correlated with airplane traffic. They went and found out that there was an airplane at that correct time. So it seems
Okay.
like it all checks out,
Getting
right?
more.
Okay. So he confessed several more times to those murders over the next several days. He even reenacted the killings for a crowd of the policemen and reporters at the canyon. Like he showed exactly what happened.
Jeez.
Then, after his first meeting with his court-appointed attorney, he changed the whole story and said that he was innocent, he was not guilty of any of the charges, and that the officers had coerced a confession from him by threatening him with a gun.
Okay.
So he said he had lied in his confession, but he was so scared that he signed the papers anywhere because they had threatened his life.
Well, now who do you believe? That they put the gun at him, or the lawyer said, "Hey, man,
crazy.
you got."
This is what I mean. This is becoming he said, she said.
Yeah.
So now, March 4th, almost a year after the murders, the jury landed on a guilty verdict. Okay, which not a huge surprise.
That seems about right. Yeah, all the stuff.
It was on the day of his 22nd birthday. Actually, he was sentenced to a term of life imprisonment. But here's what's crazy: after that got sentenced and dismissed, reporters asked the jurors if they were aware that a life sentence in Illinois meant that he could be eligible for parole in just a few years.
Right.
And the jurors were shocked. And they said, had they been aware of that information, they actually would have voted for the death penalty.
They were still going in Illinois
They
back
had
then.
no idea that he could escape it. And because of that, because of a lack of knowledge of law and, prosecutors really, failing on their end, it ended up saving his life because they would have voted for that. So he was incarcerated at the Statesville Penitentiary in Joliet.
Right.
And he was in prison for a very long time at the Illinois River Correctional Center in Canton. And he was denied parole 24 times since 1972. All right?
Yep.
So, but there was like a huge, Chester's innocent following. This became like a big deal.
Oh,
where people
no.
being like, because this was apparently pre-Miranda law and it being executed properly, like your rights, Miranda law, things like that. There's also a huge theory on how could he physically do this to 3 women. You think there'd be more of a fight, or he wouldn't make it out because he himself wasn't a super large person.
Yeah.
And then the physical capability of dragging 3 bodies.
Like
You would have just been like, oh my gosh, right?
Yeah.
They also said that a lot of the evidence used wouldn't hold up in today's court. It just, things have changed. It was a tighter process.
Sure.
And the weirdest of all was a deathbed confession from somebody else.
Whoa.
Okay.
Okay.
So
It's not the husband, is it?
in
my bad.
1982 to 1983, a Chicago police sergeant was called to record an affidavit in 2006 that recounted a confession, okay? I don't 100% know that. I don't want to mess that up.
Yeah.
Basically, a girl was passing away, and she was they were called to Rush St. Luke's Presbyterian Hospital, okay?
Yep.
She was terminally ill, and she wanted to clear her conscience. The affidavit stated the woman was lying in a hospital bed, and the officer went over to her, and she grabbed hold of his hand, and she indicated that she was younger and had been with her friends at a state park when something happened. The woman then told the officer that she was at a park in Utica and things got out of hand and multiple victims were killed and they dragged their bodies. This is a girl.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the women's daughters were in the room, jumped up and said, she's out of her mind. She's passing away. You're taking advantage of her. And they ended the interview. They ended this affidavit. So this random woman basically claimed that her and her friends were responsible for this murder, which some people really believed would be the case because it makes more sense that multiple people because of the bodies.
Yeah, because there's so many people.
Right. Now,
Jeez.
the update to this case, there's all these conflicts. There's a huge, free Chester. Chester's innocent. He was taken advantage of. There's also people who think he's guilty. November 2019, after 24 tries, Chester was granted parole and has since been released from prison to a halfway house for elderly former victims.
What? He's alive right now?
He's alive? Oh, it was 2019.
Okay, 4 or 5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, so just a couple years ago, and finally got out of prison. And some people are split. They're like, well, at least even if he was guilty, he did his time. Some people think he should never been incarcerated. But my hang up is that I don't know all the how mishandled the DNA evidence was and things like that. That's really hard to know. But what about the other woman who had his mugshot in there, who completely identified him, not knowing this background?
Yeah.
Unless the officers were so corrupt, they also paid her. It's so twisted.
This really does give no finality ending, just more confusion and wonder.
People are really, really split on this, like passionate about it.
Case, did he do it, or did the woman do it who yelled she did it with her friends?
I hate to blame women, but I gotta go with the latter.
She's not kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, it's just, look, I'd like to investigate her a little bit further.
And she just kind of went into the wind after that whole thing, after that scene.
Well, she was dying.
She was dying.
It was a deathbed confession.
Into the wind. Gone.
So you didn't really have the opportunity to follow up. But it was kind of.
Well, what do you think? You think the guy did it, or you think the girl did it?
Here's what I don't understand. The woman claiming these things, and she was like, things got out of hand. What does that mean? Like, you just had twine on you from the, like, what throws me off is that these women didn't work for the lodge, and the twine clearly came from the lodge. And like, say you're trying to rob them and it got out of hand.
Yeah.
Why did you have twine just on you? It seems weird.
And if he did it, he served about 50 years, something like that. If he got out in 2019, it was the early 70s he got put in.
He got, let's see.
Something like
it took 1 year to convict him, so he went in around 1961.
Oh, he got 60 years then almost.
So,
almost.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he served a lot of time.
He did, but if he killed 3 people, I think he should die.
Right, but he may not have.
Oh.
Isn't that insane?
That's nuts. That is Kenzie's Crimes for today. I guess you got to decide. It'll all be on the podcast. And it's the Starved Rock Murders, which a lot of people have been texting in on the middle of this thing. There's a documentary about it, apparently. Okay. I want to watch that now. And also, we did have a Chicago detective check-in named Marco.
Yes.
He said, if somebody's missing, don't wait 24 hours.
Oh,
That's not a rule, even though it is on TV all the time.
I think that's what confuses people. It's like that they put things in movies, and we're like, well, that's fact.
Yeah. I buy it.
Yeah.
Wow, there's no time restrictions, he said, when you think someone's missing. So, all right, well, thank you, Kenzie. That's another thing I got to think about. It's one more thing.
And something else you have to watch.
Yeah, that's right.
The Q101 Morning Crew.
On Q101.